What are the main functions of the cerebellum? The cerebellum is situated at the base of the brain in the posterior cranial fossa, which is the most posterior part of the skull base. The cerebellum is involved in the regulation of motor movements, which are directed movements and reflexes, and in balance control. However, functional imaging studies indicated its potential involvement in cognition, including working memory, executive functioning, such as attention, reasoning and problem solving, time perception, language, and emotional processing. The cerebellum contains almost 80% of the brain neurons and consists of two lateral hemispheres involved in the control of quick and finely coordinated movements of the arms. The lateral hemispheres are separated by a narrow midline zone, known as the vermis, involved in coordinating the movements of the trunk and legs. The cerebellum is divided into three lobes: the anterior lobe, the posterior lobe, and the flocculonodular lobe. The anterior lobe is separated from the posterior lobe by the primary fissure, and the posterior fissure from the flocculonodular lobe by the posterior fissure. The anterior lobe of the cerebellum is involved in the perception or awareness of the position and movement of the body, known as proprioception. The posterior lobe of the cerebellum is involved in fine motor coordination, such as the synchronization of hands and fingers movements. For example, buttoning or zipping. The flocculonodular lobe is involved in maintaining equilibrium and coordinating the movements of the eye, head, and neck. Now that we have an overview about the cerebellum and its function in the body, let's talk about the causes involved in cerebellum disorders. There are several disorders that can affect the cerebellum. 1. Ischemia or stroke of the cerebellar artery, also known as cerebellar stroke. This disorder results in reduced or absent supply of blood to the cerebellum. 2. Tumors, such as medulloblastoma, or abscess in the cerebellum, can compress parts of the cerebellum, affecting its functions. 3. Alcoholism. Excessive consumption of alcohol can lead to alcoholic cerebellar degeneration. 4. Thiamine, vitamin B1 deficiency. Vitamin B1 is essential for the function of cerebellar cells. 5. Vitamin E deficiency. Vitamin E is a fat-soluble antioxidant which helps protect the cerebellum cell membranes from reactive oxygen species. 6. Celiac disease. Celiac disease is caused by an immune reaction to gluten, a protein found in foods such as wheat, rye, barley, and other grains. This disease limits the absorption of necessary nutrients for the function of the cerebellum. 7. Toxin exposure such as carbon dioxide, lithium, and heavy metals can cause toxicity to the cerebellum. 8. Brain trauma. A trauma to the brain can cause an injury of the cerebellum. 9. Excessive consumption of certain drugs. Sedatives and anti-seizure medications can lead to cerebellar ataxia as an adverse drug reaction. 10. Cerebellar degeneration. Cerebellar degeneration is the process where cerebellar cells deteriorate and die. 11. Congenital malformations. Cerebellum disorders can be due to congenital malformations associated with inherited genetic mutations or that are acquired after birth. 12. Genetics. Some cerebellar diseases may be hereditary and transmitted within the family. Finally, metabolic and endocrine disorders such as Wilson's disease, hypothyroidism, and inherited metabolic disorders, for example, mitochondrial disorders, can cause disorders of the cerebellum. In conclusion, although the cerebellum plays an important role in the regulation of motor movements and balance control, little is known about its development. Little is also known about the role of the cerebellum in cognition. Interestingly, using advanced imaging techniques, some studies indicated the cerebellum may have a potential role in working memory, executive functioning, time perception, language, and emotional processing. This potential role of the cerebellum in cognition is less surprising when we consider that it is interconnected with brain networks involved in cognition such as the cerebrum, the thalamus, and the cerebral cortex. However, more research on this topic will certainly uncover more details about the mechanisms by which the cerebellum contributes to cognition. If you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe and share for more videos like this.